Scarlett has infiltrated the Arashikage for one purpose: locate and extract Jinx. But the true purpose of her friend's mission becomes clear, and it is an enormous game changer for the entire Energon Universe. Dun dun dun.
Agent Scarlett, Agent Scarlett. She's the one who infiltrates the Arashikage, the ninja clan. She's a sergeant, Agent Scarlett. Grade 5 is on her file card. Clip it and save.
Hey, it's me, Mark, and welcome to Talking Joe, the G.I. Joe Comics podcast, coming to you live and direct once more from the Energon Universe. If you're new to the show, you can find out all about us over at talkingjoe.co.uk. That is the website. Today, we will be looking at Scarlett issues 3 and 4, released 7th of August and 4th of September 2024. And joining me to look at them, as usual, it's a real strawberry blonde hero. It's Tim Finn.
Hello, Mark, and hello, listeners.
Let's look at this book. Right, Tim, so these two issues were brought to us by the creative team of writer Kelly Thompson, artist Marco Ferrari, colorist Lee Loughridge, letterer Rus Wooton, editors Ben Abernathy, logo and publication design Andre Juarez, and production Ashby Ashby Florence.
Let's have a look at the covers in the gallery.
Okay, cover A for issue 3 is drawn by the regular team of Marco Ferrari and Lee Loughridge. We are slightly higher than Scarlett and Jinx. We are looking down at them full body. Scarlett is ready to fight. Jinx is casually not worried about fighting or not ready to fight. They are surrounded by Japanese guys in business suits with swords. Scarlett, I've been thinking about color with this series, and as this cover is very representative of the interiors, same artist, same color artist, there's a lot of warm and cool playing off of each other, right? So the red of Scarlett's hair, the red of Jinx's costume, and then in this case, they are surrounded by all of this warm blue, this very purpley blue. And it's the blue in Scarlett's costume that's a little bit cool. It has less red in the blue or more yellow in the blue to be the slightest bit green. And then here on this cover, there's a sunset. So the sky up top is red and gradients down to a yellow. This is the kind of cover where there's a bunch of negative space on the bottom, sort of as tall as the very, very small barcode. And I feel like if this was a Marvel issue 25 years ago, there would be some copy here. Like, can Scarlett and Jinx, Scarlett and Jinx surrounded, or, ambushed at the so-and-so. And I don't think this is one of those covers that needs that, but it's fun to make that kind of comparison. Cover B is drawn and colored by Marcio Takara. This is Storm Shadow and Scarlett. They're both sort of mid-air, as if jumping, but more sort of a very elegant, light sort of dance jump, not an athletic battle jump. Behind them are two Japanese language characters. I don't know what they say. Maybe Mark can jump in here or not. And
No, I've not done the research, sorry.
Okay, I'm gonna guess Storm Shadow, but for all I know, it's like, redheaded gaijin. Those two characters are in red. They're bold, sort of block font. They're not like a Japanese brush script, but they're slightly fuzzy, so they do disappear a little bit behind these two characters.
Tokyo, it says, Tim. Tokyo.
Okay, great, excellent, thank you, good job. The background is almost completely white, and there are no buildings, there are no other weapons or fists or people in the cover. It's just these two characters, the almost completely white background, and these two characters that someone told me translates to Tokyo. Cover C is drawn and colored by Gleb Melnikov, who has been doing some covers, some variant covers for the Energon Universe, and has been drawing for DC for the last year or two. As recently as 1 week ago, drew a fill-in issue on Batman Superman World's Finest, which is the Mark Waid series that Dan Mora has been drawing most of. This cover is a real contrast to the previous two. All the characters here are very small. Scarlett is almost completely in profile. She's about 2/3 the way up. She's swinging from a cord, a rope, and aiming down and shooting down at a bunch of ninja who are in dark gray. What's really striking about this cover is that though they are in a building that looks sort of like a warehouse, a little bit like a factory. You see some industrial windows on the top right. You see a catwalk. You see one of those staircases that's not a, carpeted home staircase. And then some, concrete columns holding up all this stuff. Those are all drawn in straight lines and diagonals. And then they're colored in an orange. And there's no color fill for the stairs, for the walls, for the supports, for the ceiling. And so this cover is this really striking sort of combination of finished and, I don't want to say unfinished, but sort of traditionally finished characters in color. And then this design choice where the characters pop because they're in front of an almost white background. That is still a background. Now I have a question, Mark. To the left of Scarlett and under the number 3, there's a sort of a white and light blue shape.
Mm-hmm.
Does this cover connect to some other covers? What is that shape? Remind us.
Yeah, so these cover C's by Gleb Melnikov are interconnecting covers. So across 1 to 5, it sort of makes up one bigger image, though the interconnectedness of them is not necessarily particularly inspiring. So, for example, on issue number 4, it's an almost entirely standalone, separate image of Jinx and Scarlett back to back. But just on the left-hand side of the image, you get a little bit of the bleed through from that previous image with the orange background. So it's interconnecting, but not necessarily that being a especially powerful part of the overall design.
So these somewhat echo the Duke issue 1 through 5 and the Cobra Commander issue 1 through 5 covers. The C covers the 1 in 10 ratio variants where they connect, and
even Destro.
Yes, thank you. And your mileage may vary how much you love the seams where they do connect or the sort of combined 5-part image. Okay, and then cover D, this is the 1 in 25 ratio variant. This is drawn and colored by Jeff Spokes, who I spoke about in a previous episode. This is Jinx. The background is the Hector Garrido style, explosion recreation, sort of big blobs of paint to make that white, yellow, and orange and red, and then black explosion. There's no ground, there's no buildings, there's no other people. And Jinx here is standing upright, but at the ready. Her rear knee is bent, so she's a little bit ready to spring. She's holding 2 swords, and her waist sash is blowing in the wind. As I've said before, Jeff Spokes has a really attractive style that reminds me of Ryan Sook, who reminds me of Adam Hughes. in the sort of precision of anatomy and really subtle line weight changes, the actual black outline around a character. And then cover E is the 1 in 50 ratio variant. And oh man, I'm not going to spend as long gushing about Eric Canete as I did on our previous Destro episode. But here is Jinx has just landed on top of Scarlett, having wrapped her hand around Scarlett's neck to sort of strangle her. Jinx's knees are on either side of Scarlett's rib cage. Jinx has her sword angled down. Scarlett has just brought up her sword. They're both right-handed to block Jinx's sword. Jinx is wearing a mask. She's looking down. So it's that angle where it sort of looks like someone's eyes are closed, even though their eyes are open and they're looking down. And Scarlett her head is back. Her spine is bent back and upright. She's looking up, having been caught surprise. Gritted teeth, both Scarlett's hair and the sort of sash of Jinx's headband or her wristband. I think it's her headband here. Her mask are sort of flapping in curls upwards. And then the distant background is white, so they're not really in any place, an inside or an outside, but there is an immediate object behind them. Help me out with this, Mark. I think these are those wooden posts that fighters train on, sort of moving around or jumping or punching.
Yeah, I imagine something like that. Yeah, some sort of training pole. Yeah.
Okay. There's a I'm sort of thinking of other comics right now in the ether, and I believe Lee Weeks is drawing a variant cover for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles issue 3, which I think has one of the turtles balancing on some of these wooden posts. And we sometimes see these in ninja stories or martial arts stories where characters, hop from one to the next or do battle on a series of them. I think that's sort of what these are here. There are a couple metal sort of hoops or brackets around them. But the one or two of these wooden posts here have been sort of knocked around because they're at diagonals. So I feel like they're sort of getting smashed up a bit or knocked backwards in this fight. Eric Canete has a great sense of light here. Even though he's using local color, Jinx's red costume is red, Scarlett's red, orange. Hair here is red, orange. The yellow mustard of Scarlett's battle armor is yellow mustard. But there's this white highlight coming from below, which is illuminating Scarlett's chest, a little bit of her elbow, her cheek. There's some highlights for her hair and on Jinx's face. Gorgeous cover with my magic wand, where we don't have variant covers and no one has to worry about missing out on all the best covers, or no one's racing to the store to buy 50 copies so they can get one, and then they recycle 50 comics for some reason because they don't know what to do with them. This would just be the cover to issue 3 because it's so strongly illustrated and bold and wonderful. Okay,
I've got the rough for this one.
Ooh,
so got.
That's great. All these marks look like they're drawn digitally. So I will mourn the fact that this is probably not an object on paper that you can buy. I don't think there's any physical original art for this cover. But, hey man, if that makes Eric Canete draw faster or easier, more power to him. Oh, and here's the image without the logo. We see the Arashikage hexagram symbol up at the top, which is pretty obstructed by the Scarlet logo type. Otherwise, is this just an image you're showing us, or is this also a cover you can get?
No, this is Eric Canete's Twitter feed sharing some of the the work in progress image, and then also the the Virgin version without the logo, which is not a cover in itself, unfortunately.
It's just a JPEG that's now living on my hard drive. Are there any? Yes, there. Tell us about this retailer exclusive, Mark.
So there's a retailer exclusive which comes with a blue and orange background, if you so choose, and this is a somewhat uninspiring cheesecake image from Marco Torini of Scarlett looking up at her with the moon in the background, arm posed behind her head, and pointing a crossbow towards us. Wouldn't be my pick if I were to take one of these covers home. It would definitely be the Eric Kanate cover E.
Okay, issue 4, regular cover A is again penciled, inked, colored by the regular team, Marco Ferrari, Lee Loughridge. No background here, all black. In the center, there's just a flash of light where 3 swords are hitting each other. That flash is actually colored in a medium blue. On the left, Storm Shadow being pushed back a bit as holding his 2 swords out in front of him to block Scarlett, who's jumped in from the right side. She's in midair, whereas he's got his feet planted. She's swinging her sword in a little bit like a baseball swing, sort of, laterally. There's not a lot of color in this cover. It's quite desaturated. The whites of Storm Shadow's costume are given some shadow and a little bit of sort of texture through a light grayish blue and a light medium grayish blue. And then actually the same for Scarlett. Her costume, if you squint, is pretty similar to his. I've sort of jokingly thought to myself that the neat costume that Scarlett wears in these 2 issues is like the Arctic attack Scarlett costume that we've never seen before, just because of its color. But it does feel, sort of stealthy and spy and athletic. And, just because we've seen spies or famous spy characters wear, black cat suits or black tuxedos, it doesn't mean that spies have to wear black. Nice cover, nicely represents the issue, pops nicely from the rack, and does a nice job of looking quite different from the issue before it, if it's sitting next to that. Cover B for issue 4 is drawn and colored by Yasmin Putri. I made a comment. I really like her work. She's done Dark Knights of Steel for DC, which is a sort of medieval Elseworlds. And she did a Destro cover that I was excited to see would happen, but I was a little let down by. This one works better. Interestingly, I couldn't tell this was hers, except for the signature. I'm used to her sort of compositions and the way that she renders faces and textures on her DC work. And Scarlett here is quite small and is dwarfed by the arch at the dojo, at the ninja headquarters that she seems to be entering. And so this ends up being much more about place and temperature and a sense of isolation or concern. Scarlett's looking over her shoulder, maybe up at us. Perhaps she's thinking, oh man, do I have to go in here? How am I going to rescue Jinx? Storm Shadow going to find me out? The ninja's going to kill me? I'm going to make it home? All I've got is my weapon and my wits. The color work here is really nice. There are 3 red things that pop out. There's this Japanese arch, an architectural thing you walk under. There's the Arashikage logo on the ground. And then there's Scarlett's hair. There's a real sense of movement and swirling and wind to the snow. And there's enough snow on the top of the arch to show that this is an active snowstorm that's been going for a while. Behind Scarlett, but coming toward us on the bottom third of the cover, are some footprints. And I think there's a little bit of blood in them. So maybe Scarlett is wounded here, or maybe she's just dispatched someone with her skills and her weapons. Very cool cover.
This one reminds me slightly of A Real American Hero issue 84, which is the sort of the Zartan sort of background issue or history issue, where he is kind of waiting at the gates of the swordsmith to be let in.
You mean not the cover to 84, but a scene from inside 84.
Scene from, yes.
Yeah. Okay, cover C is, as Mark clarified for me moments ago, Gleb Melnikov's 1 in 10 ratio variants. This connects with the previous issue and the next issue. This is Jinx and Scarlett back to back. Jinx has one sword out at the ready. Scarlett has her crossbow sort of up and cocked. I'm not sure if I see a crossbow bolt in it, although maybe that's sort of inside. There's not much of a background here. You get some of that white and orange sort of designy industrial warehousey window on the top left from the previous issue cover. And then otherwise the background here is just sort of some nebulous white for ground and some light purple, violet, and black for designy color shapes behind them. Gleb Melnikov is an artist who I think, to his credit, is a bit of a chameleon. When he was drawing some DC work 2 years ago, I thought, I think he's taking a lot of cues from Greg Capullo. Or maybe an editor said, hey, draw like Greg Capullo. And on the one hand, that's great. If you can do that, that's hard. On the other hand, I thought, I wonder how Greg Capullo feels about this. I wonder what Gleb Melnikov's work would look like if he wasn't trying seemingly so hard to ape the style of another artist. And then interestingly, this week, Gleb Melnikov draws an issue of a series that Dan Mora has drawn about 25 issues of. And you can see him adjusting his style to draw a lot more like Dan Mora. So I think that takes a lot of talent. But again, I sort of wonder, is the inspiring artist feeling like perhaps someone's aping their style in a way that sort of waters down the specialness of their style? Or is imitation the sincerest form of flattery? And looking at this cover, I do really see sort of what I think is the Gleb Melnikov style coming in, but it actually reminds me a little bit of Chris Bachalo's work on all the Spider-Man and X books at Marvel in the last 20 years, where he draws these sort of very young, cartoony adults with sort of like big eyes and like small pouty lips. This is a nice cover. Sort of the lack of background doesn't wow me. And then the 1:25 ratio variant. This is cover D. Once again, the Hector Garrido 1982 style explosion. This one has the Hardmaster jumping at us. It is digitally painted by Vasco Georgiev, who's an artist I'm not familiar with at all. Mark, feel free to chime in if you've got any context.
I got nothing.
The Hardmaster here is lunging toward us, sword up and sort of back over his head, scabbard sort of flying out toward us. He's in his red uniform with a white sash. Skybound has used a variety of artists on these 1:25 covers now for all these issues of Duke, Cobra Commander, Destro, and Scarlett. And some of them have really wowed. Some of them have really wowed in their subtlety. I keep thinking about the Paulo Rivera Storm Shadow one for an earlier issue of Scarlett. I think this is the least strong of any of them in their technique. This is a good drawing, a good painting. It's a good composition, but it doesn't raise to the level of technique as the other ones. And then the 1:50 cover is by an artist named Chuna Hill. That's a CH, Chuna Hill. Again, an artist I'm not familiar with. There's an error detected I'm going to call out here, because on the back of every issue of Scarlet 4 with the cover gallery that shows these 5 covers, I think an editor has mistakenly left some of the information from the previous issue there, because where this cover E is shown small, it still has Eric Canete's name under it, as if you were looking at the back cover of issue 3. But this is indeed properly credited to Chuna Hill on the inside front cover of issue 4. This one, the background is some stylized smoke that's in blues and greens, about 2/3 the cover, and then the top third in sort of a V shape. It's a yellowish, pale yellowish white. Scarlett is ready to draw her sword from a scabbard. Storm Shadow's behind her, half kneeling, also drawing his sword from behind him. Both of them are looking at you. The color here looks like watercolor. I'm not sure if this was digital or on paper. I'm going to guess digital, but that's totally fine by me. But the actual texture and the desaturation of it does look like watercolor. There's some like speckles on the bottom third of the cover that I think add a little bit of sort of implied motion or texture or sort of dirt. And Mark, are there any retailer exclusive covers for issue 4?
Not for 4. An observation on all of these covers, though, is that across about half of them, Scarlett appears in this sort of newly designed outfit, which kind of echoes the V1 figure. It's sort of a black bodysuit with a kind of beigey flak jacket type thing on the top. But I don't think across any of the interiors we have yet to see this, unless I am misremembering.
Is this costume, how related is this to any Scarlett classified toys?
Well, I think it takes in a lot of the classic Scarlett kind of design cues, but I don't believe it's based on a figure. I think this is a newly originated design, which presumably will be something that we see in issue 5 as a bit of a Scarlett's arrived and she's now in the Joes kind of thing.
I'm trying to remember, is she on the cover of issue 1 of G.I. Joe, the new Energon Universe? And if so, is she wearing this?
No, she's not, is she?
No, she's not. She's not. There are 2 women on the cover to G.I. Joe #1 that's coming out in November, but not Scarlett.
Curious. Because she dies next issue.
All right, plot breakdown?
Plot breakdown.
In Tokyo, Scarlett continues her insertion into the Sato 2 building, Tiger, through a shark-filled aquatic tank. Scarlett finds and destroys the security for the Sakura building, where Storm Shadow, Jinx, and the rest of the Arashikage are busy with a legion of Mugen Omnami forces. Right first time. Scarlett makes her way to the other building where she reunites with Jinx. Their reunion is interrupted by a call over the radio that the buyer has arrived. Above them, a Cobra helicopter lands on the roof. Meanwhile, Storm Shadow looks for the secret weapon on floor 44, fighting the Mugen Nami's forces, and Jinx uses an EMP device to disrupt any surveillance and talks in private to Scarlett. Jinx gives Scarlett some intel to take back for her, but plans to stay in deep cover with the Arashikage. Scarlett figures out that the weapon was sent to floor 48, and they attack there as Storm Shadow and a squad of Cobra troopers storm in. Storm Shadow opens the crate, revealing the legendary weapon, Ichi no Ken, the Sword of Life. As Scarlett watches, she feels a wave of dread. We end there with a promise for the series finale. Next issue, Cobra Commander.
Let's start at the end. In some previous G.I. Joe stories from other publishers, Devil's Due, IDW, Paramount, and Skydance, have we seen a fancy, fabled, extra powerful sword that Snake Eyes or Storm Shadow has gotten?
I believe across most of those. I think in A-Ra from Larry Hama, in the Arashikage Showdown from Devil's Due, and in the Snake Eyes movie, they all have a fancy sword. In Hammer's world, he calls it Morning Light and Evening Shade. I don't recall the term fabled Sword of Life, Ichi no Ken.
Yeah, I think this term is new. So here is the implication that this sword, the power of it and the feeling, says Storm Shadow, and the sort of effects drawn all around him. Okay, the sword is glowing. I don't know if the sword is physically glowing or if the artist and the color artist are making it glow, because that's just a way of making it
Emphasizing it.
feel more powerful, even though it's not like a lightsaber. It's not actually glowing. And so, do you get the sense that this sword has special powers, or in a Larry Hama sword making sense, sword smithing, it's just, really strong steel and really sharp and important and dangerous?
Yeah, I get the impression that it's meant to be more significant than just it being a really nice sword. There's a strong implication on that last page that it's the sword that is glowing, particularly as the lid is lifted off the box and there seems to be a light source coming out of the box and so on. And all of this effort for a sword, it would have to be a particularly special sword. And I guess the Energon Universe, maybe somehow the sword is tied to an Energon source or something like that. I don't know.
Maybe some Japanese sword makers found some energon
Mm.
some decades or centuries ago. The sword in the special box, which is sort of the shape and size of a coffin. I'm just using that as a comparison. There's no dead body in it, although there are lots of dead bodies around it. That special box, it's guarded by a sort of laser beam column that if you touch it, it cuts you.
Yeah.
Like seemingly one of the guards gets kicked into it and it sort of zaps him in half. Okay, where do you want to start now that we've started at the end? You have any overall comments on these issues, or you want to just jump at the early pages of issue 3?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the feel and in terms of both the story and also the art style, I felt like issues 1 and 2 were and actually, Kelly Thompson has said a similar thing herself. It feels like the story starts out more like a spy story, more like a Mission Impossible, and the art style. I was thinking of Stuart Immerman and his work on Next Wave and sort of slightly more exaggerated out there kind of action. And as we've progressed, both the look and the feel of the book is much closer to kind of more manga style. That you definitely do get a sense of manga, which is kind of apt for a ninja book, I guess.
I've been thinking since issue 1, the art to me looks very much like the artist who worked on some of Prophet, the revival from 2012 at Image, and a later G.I. Joe series at IDW, the one that mixed in Transformers and all the Hasbro characters. This artist, Giannis Milo Ono Giannis, sorry about that name, which has a lot of I'm seeing 2 influences, I think, or it reminds me of a lot of manga, but also a little bit of Mobius, sort of in the openness and in some of the line work. And which is to say, I'm seeing a Japanese and a European sort of combination of art here. And my take on issue 3, particularly with all this infiltration, is it reminded me of Silent Interlude. And I don't think this is in any way a specific reference or homage. I think if you write 100 G.I. Joe stories, in between 7 and 30 of them, someone by themselves is going to infiltrate the enemy base, whether it's a Cobra or a Joe, or like a science lab or Joe headquarters or whatever. And certainly this is not a wordless, quote, silent issue. And there are more characters here, and the story plays out over 2 issues, and we're in the middle of a miniseries. But I did think, okay, well, we've got this character who's sort of climbing in and up and tricking people and going up, sneaking around upstairs and down elevator shafts with these carefully choreographed fights. And so, in a good way, in a fun way, I thought this is a little like Silent Interlude. And the first couple pages of issue 3, I thought there's some nice sort of color differentiation. Lee Loughridge to me is always colored with a light touch. A lot of flat colors, not a lot of gradients. not a lot of aggressive rendering. Lee Loughridge is someone who does not color like the mainstream masthead, like X-Men book from Marvel. Lee Loughridge colors like Gotham Central, like the dour police procedural. So the first page of this issue 3, inside the tank is blue and outside the tank is a little bit green, the lobby. And then while Scarlett is in the tank, right, everything's blue. And then on page 4, as she gets out of the tank, there's this red. She's in this room which has, red paint or red light. And it's just a small and subtle additional difference that helps you separate these places.
Yeah, and then in terms of action, Scarlett infiltrates very stealthily, very subtly, very demurely. She shoots all of the security guards in the back of the kind of neck with the dart gun.
Tranquilizer.
Tranquilizer. So she's leaving these initial security guards pretty much alive, but then turn the pages a couple on and she's slicing off half a guy's face.
Yeah, actually, I want to go back to the tranquilizer for a minute. Page 6, panel 1, we're in issue 3, and also page 7, panel 3. The inking and the coloring shows that the tranquilizer dart gun has a muzzle flash, that it creates light. And I have not ever fired a tranquilizer dart, but I'd sort of thought that they were pneumatic. That it was
I see that as a kinetic effect rather than the muzzle. Actually, no. Yeah, just to the immediate left of Scarlett, isn't there? It's like a dagger dagger of light in the air, isn't it? That I guess is the muzzle flash as she's doing 1, 2, 3, moving from left to right.
Yeah, you're on the top of page 6.
Yeah.
We see the 2 first shots and then the third one that's happening.
Yep.
And I'm okay with this. I thought if the contrast here is setting up that she's trying to spare some people, and later on she has a reaction, I think, and I wanted to ask you about this, to killing someone, then if you're reading this comic a little fast and you don't quite see her load a tranquilizer dart, you just see her shooting up some guys, it just sort of looks like lasers and machine guns and normal blasters. And I thought, okay, if there's a story note here that she's putting some people to sleep and decidedly not killing them, I do wish the inking and the color, if this is a tranquilizer dart gun that, doesn't have like a tiny explosion of gunpowder that forces the tranquilizer dart bullet out of it, that the, art and color shouldn't suggest that. Because when I read it the first time, I thought, I did read it too fast. And I thought, oh man, she shot those guys in the back of the head. And then I thought, oh yeah, no, this is, she's sparing them. Okay, so pages 16 and 17, we're in issue 3 here. Page 16, panel 5, she says to this guy, I'm sorry.
Right.
And she has just shot her crossbow bolt into his stomach.
At point blank range.
At point blank range. And the previous panels, and if you go back to the previous page, they're in this desperate fight. He's just kicked her. He slashed her shoulder. They match swords. She kicks him. She knocks his sword out of his hand with her crossbow rifle. He swats her in the face. She blocks his sword handle with her wrist. And then it's indirect. You see 3 close-ups in a row. Her hand and the weapon, her eye, his eye. And I think it's not unclear bad. I think it's oblique on purpose. You're focusing on the sort of desperate fight up in their faces, their eyes, their struggle. And then the camera, there's no camera. It's not a film, it's a comic. The quote camera pulls back. And I thought, oh, have I not been tracking this properly? Is this the first person she's killed in this issue or in this story? And then on the next page, if you're reading the object, this is the facing page with the big explosion, kaboom, right, where she gets away. on the right side of the catwalk, and one or two sort of maybe they're not silhouettes. Maybe that's just smoky, cloudy stuff. Anyway, I think I sort of see a person or two on the top left. Anyway, but
Yeah.
in the final panel, she's sitting on some stairs and she's resting her elbow on her knee and her head against her hand. And she looks sad. And she says, "Hope that did it, Jinx." And is this pain because she's been cut by two swords? Or is this sadness that she's had to, like, set off her explosives so big or so early, or kill someone?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, probably a bit of both, because she's in pain there from slashed to her side and her arm, and but yeah, I think also feeling a bit of sadness at the extreme of her actions, and at that point not for sure knowing whether it had its intended outcome. So I guess that's the thing. Hope that did it, Jinx, because if I'd went all that trouble, caused all that destruction, all that death, and it didn't do the job, that would be a real kick in the teeth. And particularly about that point with the crossbow and shooting him in point blank, I sort of interpret that as being partly the fact that it's kind of, I guess, fighting with slightly less honor. It's not an especially honorable way to kill someone with by sort of, you're in a sword fight with them in close combat, and then suddenly you've pulled a weapon on them, and they're they take an arrow to the guts, and sort of, I guess, that being needed for expediency because all of these other people are coming. She needs to get a push on, set this explosive off. So it's like, I'm sorry, I wouldn't like to resolve the things in this way. Wouldn't like to give you such a dishonorable death, but have to get on.
Yeah.
Mm.
On the first page of this issue, the very first word is Sato, and there's a Roman numeral 2.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a little confused for a few pages because it said Sato 2, or if it's not a Roman numeral, it said Sato 11, the tiger, ground floor. And I thought, I don't know what that is. And so lower on the page, on a wall behind what I now realize is a reception desk, but this also sort of just looks like any cool space in the sort of antagonist's, home base. It doesn't look like a lab, but it does, I guess, look like an office building, but I can't really tell yet. And there's a little bit of a guide written by hand by artist Marco Ferrari. This is not part of the lettering, where on the sort of wall behind the reception desk, there's a little bit of a key, sort of what happens on each floor, like B1, F1, F2, F3. So it does say Sato 2 in like big sort of stencil letters. And then there's this red tiger face sort of graphic. And I thought, I don't know what this is. And then the good news is a few pages later, we have an exterior shot. We're now several pages later. It says the Sato 3 Sakura. And I see 3 buildings, 2 of which say Sato on them, Sato Corporation. And I thought, oh, it's 3 buildings, and each of the towers is numbered. So the first building, the second building, and the third building. And each building has a subtitle, like, head to the North Tower, head to the East Tower, head to Sakura, head to the Tiger. So that's cool.
And they set that up in issue 2. I think in if you're reading it in trade, it would be a page turn, and you'd have it more fresh in your mind. Okay. But when they're setting up the mission, they describe that there are these Tokyo high rises, the Sato Trio. Building 1 is legitimate and is referred to as the Sato. The other 2 have fallen under Yakuza control. Building 2 is called Tiger. Building 3 is called Sakura.
Excellent. Yes, I'm reading this month to month, so I have forgotten everything from the previous issue. Who is Scarlett, and what does she want? I have a couple other bits from issue 3 I'd like to talk about, but let me hand the mic back to you, Mark.
I'm fine. You can you can continue on with your thoughts on 3.
Marco Ferrari continues to impress. There's no weak page. There's no weak panel in this whole issue. In both these 2 issues we're talking about today, in the previous 2 issues that I cannot remember at all. Great anatomy, great poses, strong storytelling, some complicated choreography with a character in one place traversing, like hiding in a doorway, going around a corner, faking out the bad guys as if she went up into the elevator shaft, but she didn't. And then, in another space, there are, Jinx and Storm Shadow and some other ninja and some other Yakuza. The actual anatomy, the actual fight poses. I mean, this 2/3 splash on the second page of issue 3, where Scarlett is swimming down this giant cylindrical shark tank, an actual shark tank. That's just a great drawing. She really is swimming. And this is one of those artists where I'm thinking, oh, Skybound, please keep this person working on the Energon universe. Whatever it is, a special, the second arc in G.I. Joe, hopping onto the 4th arc on Transformers, whatever other book they're going to launch in 6 months that we can only guess, like, a Scarlett sequel miniseries. I love how this looks. It's great. Please keep it going. In both of these issues, we get, I have already forgotten the term. What's the term for this? We've now seen it in Kelly Thompson's Black Widow.
The DeLuca effect.
Okay. Remind us what that is, Mark.
So this is essentially where a character or series of characters are moving through the pane. So rather than a sort of a movement being represented as a series of different panels with each piece of that movement being a single image, you'll have a character moving generally from left to right across several points of the same picture, and you see it quite a lot in the likes of Spider-Man, where maybe swinging across the city and it's being reflected as Peter Parker's off in the distance, and as he's swinging, we see maybe 4 or 5 different images of him getting closer to where the guess the camera is positioned. And it might be that color is used to kind of emphasize what is the most recent image versus where maybe he starts.
And here in Scarlett, these are double page splashes.
Yeah.
It's one panel. It's one panel that is the entire 2 pages.
And I have just read Kelly Thompson's Black Widow series, which has just recently had a collection which collects the 15 issues all together in one go. And what's one of the most, I guess, noticeable aspects sort of tying together Scarlett and Black Widow for me was the way that it's clear that Thompson is a big fan of this kind of DeLuca effect of having a big image, potentially a double page spread, where there's a big action sequence and the lead character, Scarlett or Black Widow, is kind of moving through that space in combat, taking on multiple assailants as she moves through the space.
What's also nice about both, about the DeLuca effect as used in Scarlett and also Black Widow, is there's a strong attempt to make the sort of choreography each time it's used in each of the issues distinct from the others. So it's not always a left to right sort of side scroller, pose 1, pose 2, pose 3, pose 4. 4 bad guys have been taken out, or 3 bad guys. As is the case here in issue 3 of Scarlett. There's some really novel, and it's the artists. It's not, I don't think, so much in Kelly Thompson's script, who are pulling off that work in Black Widow and in Scarlett to make the visual presentation sort of new and lively for the reader, so that it is a gimmick or a device. If gimmick is too negative, it's a device. It doesn't feel gimmicky, and it doesn't feel repetitive. It continues to feel fresh.
And how successful do you think it is here? I think sometime, I've had to kind of pause and look and think about where is the person starting, where are they finishing, and how many characters are we actually seeing in a particular panel, particularly when it's someone, when it's Scarlett, it's a bit more obvious that you've only got one Scarlett, but when with the baddies, you sort of sometimes have to pause and think, are they moving through the space as well, or is it just one person?
Yeah, so in this one in issue 3, Scarlett visually is fighting 3 people graphically as drawn on the page. I think the second and third guys might be the same person because they're wearing the same costume, although their hair is a little different. And this is a case where so the way that you described sort of the Spider-Man example, the artist Bruno Redondo has also been doing this a lot in Nightwing the last 2 years for DC. But if you can imagine a panel where Spider-Man's swinging and there are 4 of him in the distance and he's getting bigger and closer. And then in the 5th one, he's sort of landed on the rooftop right in front of us. And in that one, he's inked and colored normally. And the other 4, maybe the inking is lighter and the coloring is lighter. And it sort of looks graphically like he's half invisible, half transparent. But it's this sort of slowed down blur effect. That's where he was, and this is where he is now. I feel like these in Scarlett could use a little bit of that color effect, where maybe in some of the earlier poses, Scarlett, or in the case of issue 4, Storm Shadow and Jinx and Scarlett are drawn a little more transparent or lighter, or sort of all like one color gray. Because I feel like when we get to issue 4, this double page splash battle scene of the trio fighting all these bad guys, Scarlett has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 poses. Storm Shadow has 3, and Jinx has 2.
3. She's got one on the far right, one in the middle, and then one.
Okay. I'm going to interrupt myself. I like the idea here that writer and artist are giving you an excuse and really forcing you to slow down. You have to slow down and take a minute and look at this page. You have to take in all of this choreography and this detail. You have to either enjoy it or think about it and figure it out. Or if it's clear enough, you have to sort of run through all the steps to sort of prove it to yourself. And I think, like you just said, I think some of these, I'm sure they work. I'm sure Marco Ferrari figured it out and they do work. But in looking at this one in issue 4, I think, oh, did I want sort of one more pose or one less pose for one of the trio of protagonists? Or do I want like a little more like cause and effect, where like some of the bad guys, it's like, it's not just him like getting slashed, it's also another drawing of him right there, like drawing 3A and 3B of him, like bringing his sword down and then also sort of half overlapping with himself, getting slashed and falling. So I think these are mostly successful and occasionally dazzling. Okay, some other things about issue 3 that I wanted to talk about. Marco Ferrari pulls off a nice bit of sort of graphical leading your eye on page 19. This is this page. It's got 4 tall vertical panels after Scarlett, very small on the top of the page, is sort of entering the space again where the shark tank is. And in the first of these tall panels, it's the second one on the panel, she fires her grappling hook. And then in the second panel, it's the third panel on the page, excuse me, she's starting to climb up. And then the next one, she's gotten further up and sort of the camera's zooming in on her. So she's bigger, we're closer. And then in the final panel on the page, it's just her foot and she's already made it sort of off the page. And there's a subtle thing that Ferrari is doing here, which is that if you look at where Scarlett is across those 4 panels, she's low in the first one, higher in the second one, even higher in the third one, and even higher in the fourth one. And that might seem obvious. Like, yeah, Tim, if I'm having someone climb in a comic, I'm going to have them go from lower to higher. But I do feel like this is one of those potential pitfalls for a less experienced comics artist who might sort of move the camera around the character, or have the character um, sort of climbing in a more arbitrary way that doesn't visually, graphically on the actual page get higher as it progresses. Because you could do a montage where someone's like, let's say someone's climbing, let's say it's not a glass cylinder filled with water and sharks, let's say it's a mountain, and you're doing 4 panels in a row of someone climbing a hill or a mountain. You could have like a close-up of their eyes, and you could have like a faraway shot where they're a tiny speck, and you could have a medium shot where it's their like waist up and they're holding their backpack and trudging forward. And you wouldn't necessarily have from left to right them get higher on the page. So I do think in some ways this is obvious. I think it's obvious because Marco Ferrari took the sort of subtle and better, made the subtle and better choice here. But it's just something small that I appreciate. It's also something that I like. There are sort of 2 examples of zipatone being used in this issue, or I should say, because I'm certain it's digital, a mechanical tone, which is to say a layer in Photoshop where you can have something appear. On page 5, in the 3rd panel, this is when Scarlett's hiding in the like stairwell, and she's looking through the doorway at the 3 Yakuza who are running by. And she's really dark because she's in the shadow. She's dark for 2 reasons. One, because colorist Lee Loughridge is coloring her hair, skin, and costume with darker colors, but also because Marco Ferrari applied a layer of black dots over her. And again, I don't think this is a physical piece of clear adhesive with printed black dots on it, though that'd be amazing. Friend of mine just bought some to use on some art projects recently while on a trip to a faraway place, like a big, wonderful art supply store. So this is something you can do in Photoshop, and in Photoshop you can choose how close the dots are to each other, how big they are, and if they're all the same, or if there's a gradient, maybe they get smaller as they go up or down.
This falls in this grey area of what is the artist's responsibility versus what is the colorist's responsibility, and it could be either one of those two making that choice.
I think it's the artist, because I don't know that I've seen Loughridge use a mechanical tone before, dots like this. I think we also saw this in issue 1 or 2, although that wouldn't be conclusive. But later in the book, on page 18, Jinx and Storm Shadow are fighting, and the column of light, the sort of cutting white laser beam that guards the box that has the magic sword in it. In the second panel, because Scarlett blew up the thing in her building on a previous page, that column of light, the like security system laser beam cutting thing, disappears. It dissipates. And on that second panel on page 18, you can see some white dots, and they get sort of wispy, right? Where they're close together and then where they get sort of smaller, and it looks a little bit like smoke. And I think what the effect is, the light source, the cutting laser of cylinder death, has just been turned off, and it disappears, and you're seeing the last moment of it still in the air. And that might be something in the art that Ferrari did in black and said to Loughridge, oh, invert this so it's white. That might be something that Ferrari did in white and said, oh, just so you know, all of my line work is black, but there's this one layer on this one page that's got a white effect. I wanted you to have it. Or yes, maybe Loughridge did it. But because I love mechanical tones, and we used to see that in comics occasionally, like sometimes in Marvel's Transformers, like all the Autobots and Decepticons in like 84 and 85, their shoulders and their torsos and their knees and their feet are just like cubes and boxes. And sometimes the inker would apply a mechanical tone to the side of that was in shadow, and you'd get these like straight up and down lines that just said metallic. So that's fun. When you read issue 3, Mark, who did you think was in the helicopter with the Cobra logo on the last page?
Um, hmm. Did I have an expectation? I don't know. I don't know that I necessarily, at that instance, prejudged. I guess there's a possibility that Cobra Commander is in there.
Yeah, that's who I thought.
And this is I guess a Schrodinger's helicopter that we simultaneously could have Cobra Commander in there or not until the door opens and we see we can't be sure.
Jumping ahead to issue 4, it's just a Cobra officer and a Cobra trooper, right? Or maybe a couple more.
Yeah, but they talk about a buyer, so I'm assuming that these are Cobras that have sort of run on ahead.
Okay.
So I think that the buyer has a very good chance that is Cobra Commander.
Okay.
Is yet to be seen. And that next issue box, Cobra Commander, question mark, exclamation mark.
Right, at the end of issue 4.
Yeah, at the end of issue 4 gives us a hint that there's a good chance we might see Cobra Commander next issue.
I have 2 last things to say about issue 3. One is on page 20. This is almost at the end of the book. Scarlett has this interior monologue about base jumping. She gets the roof of the building. She climbs up to its sort of smokestack tower. She looks down. She fires her grappling hook. She winches it to her waist. And then the bottom of page 20, she's continuing her monologue, and you can see Sato 2 and Sato 3 next to each other and a big distance between them. And it's really subtle, but you do see the slack of her grappling hook cord. It's a curved line. It's an arc, like a smiley face, just the mouth part, from the left to the right, under that middle monologue that says, hoped it would be a bit later, but here we are. And I thought, cool, the camera backs up and reminds us what a great distance this is, how dangerous, how exciting this is for Scarlett to be doing this. And then I thought, man, I wish there's some of that mechanical tone for the smoke or clouds. Actually, and in the previous panel too, all around Scarlett, there's a mechanical tone as she's clicking the thing to her waist. But that cord at the bottom of the page, that very, very, very faint, curvy line from the left building to the right building, I wish that was brighter. And I think in the actual scene, you wouldn't see it because it's thin and it's far away and it's nighttime. But I imagine some readers didn't quite see it, and maybe on Lee Loughridge's computer monitor, the contrast was a little brighter, and maybe on my page it's a little less, shows up a little darker. The other thing I wanted to point out is a sentence or two from one of the letters in issue 3. Someone says, "I was never the hugest fan of G.I. Joe growing up. I just never got into it the way I did with other franchises. ... I'm a huge fan of Kelly Thompson and her previous work, so I love seeing her get to add her creative voice to the ever-expanding EU." And I thought, oh, this is an interesting angle, because 5 months ago, when the creative teams for this second wave were announced, I was thinking, no, I want Joshua Williamson to write everything. I want, he's going to do Duke. He's going to do Cobra Commander. I want them to be consistent. He's the architect. I want him to do Destro. Who's that British guy who's like a 26-year-old? Kelly Thompson, like, nah, she writes Marvel and DC and creator-owned at Image. And I have been enjoying the Scarlett miniseries and the Destro miniseries. And Joshua Williamson is really busy, both with G.I. Joe and DC All In. That's the big thing he was teasing on the internet a few weeks ago, folks. He was not teasing some giant G.I. Joe or Transformers thing. But even though it's obvious, it hadn't actually, I'm embarrassed to say, quite occurred to me that part of why you get Kelly Thompson to write one of these books is you pull in Kelly Thompson's audience. And here is some proof of that. And I thought, cool. Here's someone who's not a big G.I. Joe fan, who's giving this book a try and who likes it. And so Kelly Thompson, brings her star power, however big or bright you might consider that power.
And while we're hovering on the letters page for Scarlett issue 3, I'll just point out here that we have a letter from Joe Renkley, aka Patreon member Joe Renkley, who is really solidifying here our hypothesis that Talking Joe Patreon members generally, and also and also Talking Joe Facebook members as well have a golden ticket and a prioritization onto the letters pages of the G.I. Joe comic books.
Joe, I like your letter. My only comment is that you don't mention Talking Joe.
Yeah, try better.
So remember, listeners, when you write email to gijoe@skybound.com, if you listen to the podcast. Okay, so let's talk about issue 4 for a bit.
Yeah, so we've got the reuniting of Jinx and Scarlett because they've not been able to, up to this point, to actually talk properly and with the recognition that they know each other, because they've been having to be very covert about all of this stuff. And that she uses an EMP device so that they can talk in private.
What did you think about their what's the word? Their reunition? Their reunion.
Their reunion. Yes, of course. Yeah, it was all right. I picked up a little bit of online chatter again, sort of like, are they just friends? And I'm going to take Kelly Thompson at her word that she wants these characters just to be super close friends and without a romantic interest above it. I like the little character beats of them sort of teasing one another about killing off Jinx's plants because Scarlett doesn't have a green finger. Green thumb? Green finger? Green thumb?
I don't know what a green finger is.
It's if you pick your nose too much. And then she's sort of going, wants to stay in deep cover and has sort of prepped for this moment by sort of stashing intel about her person that she can give to Scarlett, so that she can take that away and use it, and sort of positioning the Arashikage as this other faction that potentially might be a force for good against Cobra, or if you're not a force for good, then a potential ally. So yeah, I think generally handled pretty well. What about you, Tim?
I liked the reunion. I felt a great sense of relief and happiness that this tension that's been running in the whole series, that Scarlett is worried about Jinx, that Scarlett doesn't know what happened to Jinx, that Scarlett has to do all of these risky things, go to Japan, a mission that's off the books, and then she even says to Storm Shadow, this bit in these 2 issues is a suicide mission. And I'm aware of so many stories in popular fiction where 2 male characters get to be close and bonded. It's like they're brothers, even if they're not blood brothers. And we don't see as much with 2 women being such close friends. And when it's men, my brain almost never defaults to, are they a couple? Are they romantically interested? So yes, I did think that way back in issue 1 of Scarlett. And then I sort of reminded myself, no, like 90% of sort of friendships that I see in movies and TV and books, it's a man and another man. And, like 1 to 5% of those, it's romantic. And so if for the first time in a couple of months or however long, I'm seeing 2 women who are very good friends, wouldn't it be fair if I use that same percentage? Well, 5% of the time, they're going to be romantically linked. It's like, well, I haven't seen any sort of relationships like this where 2 women are friends and they just miss each other just as best friends, as sort of bonded soulmates. And so by that logic, it is unlikely that this is romantic. And yes, the writer told us it's not. I like this scene a lot. I appreciated that Thompson finds a way for them to talk that doesn't strain credulity.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I feel like characters are like having a really important or deep or top secret conversation while something's happening right sort of in front of them. They're like running away from the bomb they planted, and they'd have to be yelling to be heard. It's like, wait, you're talking about the good guy plans. Aren't there bad guys all around you? Isn't someone going to radio the control panel? The story slows down, but I know that they don't have long. So I do like how this scene is arranged. There's also something else interesting that's happening with lettering here, and it starts on page 4. The final panel of page 4 is all black. So that's why I bet Marco Ferrari breathed a sigh of relief. It's like, oh, great. For one panel, I don't have to draw anything. It's like, I'm going to draw a couple panels right around this with just some fighting and no background. I'm going to make this easy on myself. And but here's this panel where everything's all black. And there are 2 caption boxes where people are speaking in another place, and we are supposed to be hearing them talk while we see Storm Shadow do this cool fighting. And how do you know who is who? Well, the first one says, we have 2 minutes. Do you have a burn bag, comma, Scarlett? And then the other one says, of course. So you think, all right, well, the first one's Jinx and the second one's Scarlett.
Mm-hmm.
But this might be letterer Rus Wooton. It might be color artist Lee Loughridge. I'm guessing it's the letterer, actually.
Mm-hmm.
There's a tiny sort of offset square behind these. Technically, they're not rectangles, they're parallelograms. On the top left, when Jinx is talking, there's a little sliver of sort of darker color. And when Scarlett is talking, there's a little sliver of lighter color. And it's sort of pinkish red. And so that's how over the next 3 pages until we actually see them talking in the stairwell before they hug. That's how we know who's talking. And so that's a nice graphical bit of problem solving in the comics.
They do something very, very similar in Destro issue 2, which is also Rus Wooton as a letterer, where Destro's sort of narration has a kind of a silver box behind it, and the Crimson Twins have a red box behind theirs.
Well, I'm talking about lettering. Error detected on page 12. It's really small. On page 12, this is the page where Scarlett and Jinx are climbing in the like ventilation shaft above the doorway. It's the first panel on the page. We just see a shadow in the stairwell, and there's a sign that says F48, like 48th floor. On the final panel, hey, look, there's a mechanical tone. There are black dots all over Scarlett to show that she's in shadow. She's saying in Japanese, if we can just keep them on 44. Oh, sorry. It's not Scarlett. We see Scarlett. Someone below them in the big penthouse says, if we can just keep them on 44, we'll be fine. And there's an open caret at the beginning of that word balloon for Japanese. There's no closed caret. But there is 2 panels before and on the next page. Yeah. So, man, I hope they fix that for the softcover collection. I did have one more thing to say about Jinx and Scarlett being reunited, which is in issue 4, and particularly when Jinx hugs Scarlett, Scarlett's been cut twice. It happened in the previous issue. And she doesn't seem to be, limping or asking anyone for a bandage or a tourniquet. When Jinx hugs her, there's no moment of, ooh, ow. I just got cut there by one of the bad guys. And I think this speaks to, that Scarlett is the best of the best of the best. And so she'll get the mission done even if she's wounded. And I don't want to see her slow down and not finish the mission because she's losing blood. I do want some, sort of exaggeration or sort of superhuman ability here. But I do feel like issue 4 forgets that Scarlett is bleeding and maybe a little slower or in pain. And
Yeah, I mean they've not forgotten to draw the bloods, but yeah, in terms of recognizing it beyond the fact that there's a bit of color on her side, yeah, not really bringing up.
this bit where on page 11, Scarlett talks about floor 44 and 44 having a significance, and no, they wouldn't have gone to this floor, they would have gone to that floor. What did you make of that?
I went with it. Maybe there's a logic. Maybe there's a. I mean, I know from Japanese culture that there is a little bit more emphasis on the, auspiciousness of particular numbers. So fine, why not? It's there's a bit of a leap in logic there, but I'm not gonna worry about that too much.
Okay, I think I agree.
They make it to the right place while Storm Shadow's sort of in the wrong place, and then they sort of make their way to this sword. But I guess the exciting moment is that we see a couple of these Cobra troopers, which I believe for the Energon Universe, outside of Cobra Commander issue 5 covers, this is the first time that we see a Cobra character outside of Cobra Commander at all.
Yeah, did we not? Right, we didn't see anyone in Duke because Duke only was tracking Mars.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah.
There were some beefy security types that looked similar to Cobra uniforms, but they weren't quite that full design, and they didn't have a Cobra logo. I think this is the first time that we're seeing a Cobra character with a Cobra logo upon it. And this might be, and just like the case of Duke, mostly taking place between issues 4 and 5 of Cobra Commander, because in Cobra Commander issue 4, Destro is, he's in his Mars location, and he's looking across his factory floor, which is where kind of Duke issue 1 picks up, and then issue 5 is set after the events of Duke issue 5, with the back confrontation, all that kind of stuff. So it might be that what we're seeing here is the Cobra army, which potentially happens in pages of Destro number 5 or some such. So there we go. Shenanigans with Cobra. This is talking to the fact that there are Cobra troopers. There is a Cobra logo. There's a Cobra helicopter, and we've yet to see that sort of true formation of a proper Cobra force outside of that, rabble of militia that we saw in Cobra Commander issue 5.
I think I've run out of things to say about the pages of art and story. There is a fun ad in issue 4 I wanted to ask you about. Do you have anything else to say about issue 4 content-wise?
I was only just going to note that Jinx has got an interesting look here, that she's got kind of ninja high heels and pointy claws on the front of those. So it's, I think this is a comic design rather than a toy design here. Just an interesting visual.
Yeah, I think I've always subtly thought that Jinx was a little bit small, a little bit slim, a little bit short. And this might be going back to, the scene in the animated G.I. Joe movie where Falcon is flirting with her, and Falcon is drawn as big in the animated movie. And, when we see like Ron Wagner draw Jinx and the other ninjas in the Marvel run, here's an average female athlete martial artist next to some average males athlete martial artist, and so she's likely to be shorter than. But if you look at some of these pages where Marco Ferrari draws Jinx, she's got muscles, she's tone. And this page, it's halfway through the book at the centerfold, where she's sort of hanging or climbing down from the to the top of the penthouse, right? And there's like that pipe that's crossing, and then Scarlett is down there hiding behind a ceiling column. Jinx is not skinny here. She has like big muscular thighs and she has sort of big muscular arms. Not like a bodybuilder, but like very, very toned and fit. So her costume, and we've seen this, I think we saw this when she was in her fancy dress back in issue 1.
Right.
I think there is this subtle message here. I mean, it's Scarlett's book. I think there's this message here that, I mean, G.I. Joe has always done this. The women are as capable as the men, but I think there's an added layer to it here because Jinx is a little bigger than we have seen her. Mm-hmm. And so the sort of capability and the kick-assness of the characters, it's visually heightened. And she's got cool tattoos. And as you said, these sort of ninja high heels that have the sort of normal high heel part at the heel and then these two, pointy bits at the front. Looks hard to walk in.
Yeah, so I guess I thought that you might bring this up in the back of issue 4. There is an advert for a G.I. Joe video game, G.I. Joe: The Wrath of Cobra, which has been on the radar for a little while. The release date was delayed such that they could release it on a full suite of platforms, given some of the enthusiasm of the early previews. So this is a retro side-scrolling kind of video game, which put you in the mind of the likes of
Konami's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Right?
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, The Simpsons, X-Men, some of those classic side-scrollers. So yeah, very exciting to see, G.I. Joe being advertised across, other media outlets aside from comics in the back of the comic book, which is definitely something that we used to see. So yeah.
So part of why I wanted to bring this up is that the graphics here look like 16-bit. This looks like a video game from 1990. And the artwork on this ad, the actual ad itself looks like an ad from 25 years ago because it has a couple rectangular screenshots, but they're very small. And then there's, some type in the logo, and there's some, painted artwork of Cobra Commander and Duke and Scarlett and Snake Eyes and Roadblock and Gung Ho and who's that other guy?
I think this character is Ripcord.
Okay.
Just from having seen material about this game, I think that's who it is.
And the artwork of those characters feels like it's digitally painted, and it feels like the characters are a tiny bit cartooned. There's a little bit of a flatness, to their faces. This is not like Hector Garrido paintings for the toy package art. This is not Russ Heath animation model sheets for the TV show. This is something that's familiar, but also different than sort of all the ones we've seen before. I guess the thing it reminds me most of is the artist who paints the wonderful Reaction figure package art. But again, still, it's a little bit cartoonier than that. And I'm so tickled because I don't think I really knew this was coming. I don't follow video game news at all, but it's apparently coming for PlayStation and Xbox and Switch and Steam. There's a QR code and it says reserve your copy now, which I assume means that this is a digital download and not an actual box that you can buy. But
I believe
this is a retro thing. A couple companies have done this in the last year or two, right? Where like there's a few games, have they actually been released as like a box in the last few years? Or am I making that up?
What, these retro type games? I don't know. I don't follow.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't follow.
Someone,
I mean,
tell us in the comments.
The last G.I. Joe game, proper game, Operation Blackout, I think it's called, wasn't it? That got a physical release.
Okay.
Yeah, but there was also like a Sumbo style sort of animated trailer for this as well. So definitely go and check that out because that's quite a lot of fun as well.
So part of why I wanted to bring this up is that the graphics here look like a video game from 1990. So it's a little bit hard to tell. But
quite a lot of fun as well.
G.I. Joe is the code name for America's daring, highly trained special mission force. Its purpose to defend human freedom against Cobra, a ruthless organization determined to rule the world.
From the jungle to the stormy peaks, through the desert and across the seas, they're the ones who answer the call to win the battle for freedom for all. Super soldiers gather the prey, like an eagle chasing out its prey. The hazards and the tries they stand together. When the vicious cobra strikes, our heroes are bent to the fight with strength that rises from the scars and strife. G.I. Joe, a real American hero. G.I. Joe, to deal with the menace of evil. Go Joe, take us the press of the world we call marching. G.I. Joe, a real American hero. G.I. Joe, to deal with the menace of evil. Go Joe, when it just suppresses the world we call G.I. Joe.
Shall we wrap up with
Yes.
some scoring of these two issues overall?
Yes.
And maybe you can talk in your, because we didn't cover issues 1 and 2 together. Tim, maybe you can kind of think about the sweep of the 4 issues so far as well.
No, I'm just giving my number for issues 3 and 4.
So, this is, I think it's interesting that this story seems to be a little bit more straightforward than perhaps some of the other comics that we've been reading in recent days. That it is largely, following Scarlett as the protagonist with then Jinx and Storm Shadow around her, and it's relatively linear, slightly more straightforward than in terms of the ambition and the execution of this, but it's a fun adventure story, handled pretty well. I like the art, and I like the fact that the art is kind of attuned to the themes of the book in terms of those manga influences. So enjoying it, but perhaps sort of the ambition of the story versus kind of the origins that were being set up in Duke and Cobra Commander as a comparator make me feel slightly less excited about it. So good overall. Let's say 7.5.
You make a good point. I agree. Duke and Cobra Commander felt almost revelatory, but those have the advantage of going first. By the time Scarlett comes out, we've already read 5 issues each of those. So Kelly Thompson can't or isn't creating, the same kind of sort of depth of conspiracy or mystery. Hers is also a little more character driven. Cobra Commander wants revenge and to conquer. Duke wants to figure out this conspiracy, and he lost a friend back in Transformers number 2. But Scarlett's motivation here is more straightforward and a little more, I guess maybe the word is moderated. Modulated. She misses her friend. She wants to rescue her friend. I'm not worried about her friend. I'm confident Jinx is going to get out of this and is going to get out of this a good guy. But I love the execution. I love the things that have been turned on their head, that, Jinx is trapped with the bad guys, that we don't know what's going to happen. And Scarlett doesn't have a lot of intel. Stalker can't help her out that much. We did have that cameo with Snowjob. So I'll just rate issues 3 and 4 7. Great art and action, good character moments. No big revelations like, it's so-and-so who we've never seen before, or it's so-and-so who we haven't seen yet in this version. So some of that thrill isn't there, but I do like it a lot. I will note that Duke sold the best at my store.
Okay.
But I think a lot of that has to do with it went first and there was a lot of mystery to it. And it was still sort of in the reflected glow of Transformers, which was, people were talking about and was doing well. Destro and Scarlett are not selling as well as Cobra Commander and Duke. And I think Duke sold a little better than Cobra Commander. So, it'll be interesting to see when there's just a book called G.I. Joe, what that'll do. Because that'll be the 21st Joe comic in the Energon universe. And I don't think people are at all tired, but it's a big investment if you've bought all these comics, to keep buying more and, to check back in, like what's next? Oh, it's the main series. Okay. Yeah.
That's interesting. The 21st issue, but there might be this untapped audience as well of like the people who sort of were holding back, or it wasn't maybe quite on their radar, but now it's like, oh, G.I. Joe issue 1, right? A new G.I. Joe issue 1. This is the big one. Maybe this is where I have to pay attention and finally actually buy it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because imagine if Transformers, imagine if the Daniel Warren Johnson Transformers that's now, up to issue, what is it, 12 or so. Imagine if before that came out, there had been a Bumblebee miniseries, a Starscream miniseries, a Shockwave miniseries, and an Optimus Prime miniseries.
Mm-hmm.
The excitement that people have had for Transformers, the first 6 issues that Johnson drew, and then all 12 that he's been writing and doing covers for, that would get sort of lifted and spread out backwards in time over, I think, those 4 issues, those 4 miniseries in this pretend analogy. But you do make a good point that there are lots of, I feel like every time I go to a G.I. Joe convention, I talk to a sort of lapsed fan who is out of comics or is out of G.I. Joe comics, and they'll say something like, oh yeah, I heard it came back. And I feel like even, another 3 months, another 6 months later, I might still get that interaction where someone sort of knows that Energon Universe is different from a Real American Hero universe, sort of knows that Energon Universe is shared, but maybe not the specifics, like I think there are a lot of G.I. Joe fans who are a little or a lot checked out on comics who still don't know what Void Rivals is. And I'm sure there are video game fans right now who know a lot more about G.I. Joe Wrath of Cobra than I do. And I'm a big G.I. Joe fan, but I have not been following this gaming news.
You need to be listening to the Full Force Weekly with Christopher McLeod, that guy.
Christopher McLeod needs to come to my store more often.
You're like Destro and the Crimson Twins, you two.
Okay, we worked something out.
Right.
He lives pretty far away. It's okay.
So next time he's threatening to go to Assembly Required, Tim. So you might actually see him this year.
Oh, that's nice.
Next time on Talking Joe, we will be covering the latest issues of G.I. Joe as they come out. So Scarlett issue 5, Destro issue 4 and 5, plus A-Ra from Larry Hama, and the Skybound era of G.I. Joe as that continues. So we will also be dipping back into the Devil's Due Disavowed era as we close out our look back at the G.I. Joe America's Elite title. So that will be very exciting end of an era for us at Talking Joe. You can find out more about Talking Joe at talkingjoe.co.uk, which is the website that points you to the places we are at. Talking Joe on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, on YouTube, etc. Make sure you have subscribed to us on YouTube. Leave a thumbs up and a comment to give me a warm fuzzy glow inside. And, if you're on a podcast platform, why not leave a 5-star rating there. We're on Patreon, patreon.com/talkingjoe. So a big thanks to all of our backers there, which include Richard, Sam, Bill, Christopher, Justin, Rob, Shane, Simon, Chris, Joe, Craig, Joe, that's that guy that wrote that letter, Craig, Frank, and Mike, who are all getting early access to episodes as well as some exclusive content. Tim, where can people find you when you are not talking to me about red-headed ladies doing karate, kung fu, ninjaing?
youtube.com/Atomic Productions. There's some great videos there about TV and film. I have a comic book store in Somerville, Massachusetts, Hub Comics, and I write about G.I. Joe at my blog, arealamericanbook.com.
And that is us done. But remember,
Nobody Beats Talking Joe, an international podcast.
laters. Video off now, and I'll just stick up the slides.
Okay, so we're totally done with video.
Yeah.
Okay. Take my coat off. Take my pants off.
Don't have to take your pants off.
Already off. Were they ever on?